It's about getting okay with conflict and actually knowing that in that moment, there are tools you can use to get yourself out of the situation if it feels like it's too much. Hi, I'm Michelle Elman and I'm a life coach and author. Boundaries are how we teach the world to treat us. They're the line between who the world wants us to be and who we actually are. It's all about behaviour and treatment, so it's what is and isn't acceptable. Boundaries are really difficult, especially for women to set, because the world has taught them they have to put everyone else first. The problem is, by the time you put everyone else first, there's no time and energy left for you. And if you put yourself first, you are likely to receive words like you're being harsh, difficult, selfish. And that can be really difficult to hear, so a lot of the times people are discouraged from setting their boundaries. Boundaries are essential for self-esteem, confidence, and personal power, and they also protect you from gaslighting, manipulation, or anyone tries to take advantage of you. There's a myth that boundaries are mean, and they're not. A lot of the time people are trying to save the relationship, they're not trying to end it. But if you're not used to boundaries, it can come across as someone being angry or annoyed with you, when actually they're trying to better your relationship. While setting boundaries is hard, living without boundaries is a lot harder.
Hey, Michelle. Hi. Let's take a seat. Michelle, how do you set a boundary?
So the simplest boundary and the first boundary we all know is the word no. So if you put a kid in the arms of a stranger and they're not happy, they will scream. Even if they don't have the vocabulary, they know where their boundaries lie. And then we learn something called theory of mind, which means that you become aware that other people can think. So not only can you think, but you know someone else can think. And if someone else can think, then they can think badly about you. And that's where saying the word no becomes a little bit more complicated, because you don't want other people to think badly about you.
People pleasing is the worst.
Yeah.
But I think most people out there, I mean, certainly I fall into this category, can be a real people pleaser. We want to be liked, we want people around us to feel comfortable. So putting boundaries in place can often challenge those fears.
Oh, absolutely. People pleasing is the opposite to setting boundaries.
Yeah.
And I was a people pleaser. And actually, if I'm being really honest, I was a pushover at times, because it's that thing which women are taught to do, which is put everyone else first. And then if you have time and energy left, then you can do self-love, then you can do self-care. But by the time you've taken care of everyone else, there is no time and energy left. And so you're always bottom of the list. And if you ever stand up for yourself, you ever communicate your needs, you're told you're difficult, you're harsh, you're direct. All of these words are words that dissuade women from communicating in a way they want to communicate and actually communicating how they feel in the moment.
Yes, so let's get to basics, because it's really hard to start setting boundaries when you haven't before. It feels deeply uncomfortable, emotionally, physically. The whole thing is torture. How do you get over that?
Yeah, so I think there are two routes. Some people find it easiest to set boundaries with strangers, or some people find it easiest to start with the people closest to you. And whoever you find it easiest to, and the area of life you find it easiest, start with that. But I always want people to remember that setting boundaries is like learning a language, and the first time you do it, it's never going to be perfect. So even if you set the boundary in a clumsy, messy way, saying something is always better than saying nothing.
What's the difference here between a boundary and a wall? Because I think, again, if you're new to this, it can be really easy to mistake a wall for a boundary and just go, shutting that out, don't want to know. But there's got to be that flexibility, I guess, that a boundary might give you.
Yeah, so walls keep everyone out, boundaries keep out the wrong people. So people who have this F you, F this energy, that's a wall. That's trying to keep people away, and it's usually a result of someone feeling like they can't be vulnerable.
If your boundary has been crossed and you start to sort of lose trust in perhaps that relationship or that dynamic, how can you start to rebuild that so that you can perhaps move towards having a healthier relationship?
So trust builds over time, and it will take small moments, small instances to let that trust build back up. And usually it will come from moments where you've spoken about the boundary and they've acted differently. So a lot of the times we focus on apologies, but it's not about the apology, it's about the behavior change that comes afterwards. So a lot of the times people get confused with boundaries because they say, oh, well, aren't you just forcing someone to change? And what I respond to that is that they always have a choice to whether they're going to respect that and change their behavior, or they're going to continue doing what they've always done.
I mean, you can't force anyone to do anything or think anything. So like you say, it's their choice as to how they respond to it, and they don't have to necessarily understand it. It's up to you with, I guess, how much tolerance you've got and how far you want to push that and what consequences you want to put in place.
Yeah, and I also think it's normal that what you want in relationships, whether it's platonic, family, or professional relationships even, can change. And as you change and as you start setting more boundaries, it's okay and it's very normal that the relationships you're looking for in your life might also change.
So, Michelle, we have got some community questions from our lovely Happy Place gang. And the first one says, pleasing certain people to avoid conflict is a major problem for me. How can I strengthen myself? That is a big one. Nobody likes conflict.
Yeah.
So a lot of people do sort of shapeshift to deal with it. What advice would you give here?
So it's about getting okay with conflict and actually knowing that in that moment, there are tools you can use to get yourself out of the situation if it feels like it's too much. One of the best tools I use, and it's quite a controversial tip, is actually texting. And texting is demonized, but as a former hothead, it was one of the tools that actually taught me how to communicate better, because I found I avoided the conversation in person. And the only way for me to do something rather than nothing, which is what I said earlier, is actually just to text it. And even if it was just starting the conversation of text, it was saying something like, hey, that thing you said last night really upset me. Could we have a conversation about it some point at the weekend?
I'm instantly relieved.
Yeah, it's so they don't have to guess about why you were annoyed. They have warning. They don't feel like they're going to be bombarded. And within the conversation, you can also hit pause. That's another great tool.
Yes.
When you start the conversation and it starts to get heated, one of my favorite sentences is, this conversation has become unproductive. Could we come back to it in 5 minutes? I think a lot of the time that's why we get scared of conflict, because we think it's going to immediately lead to that, when actually you have a lot of control within the conversation.
The next community question is, how do you express the right words without coming over as aggressive?
Well, I think you have to look at the language you're using. So if the language you are using is not aggressive, the chances are you're not aggressive.
Yeah.
And so if you can stand behind your words and you can stand behind that everything you said was as polite as you can make it, then that's good enough. And if they interpret it as aggressive, then so be it.
Michelle, thank you so much. That has been deeply inspiring for me. I'm going to set better boundaries. But it was brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoyed that, please do subscribe. We've got some brilliant episodes on the way. We've got one on bloating, seasonal affective disorder, and anticipatory grief. So lots of really big topics to get our teeth into. As well as subscribing, if you've got any thoughts or feelings on this episode or any of the episodes, then please do leave a comment just below, and thank you for watching.